Well, we're on top of the hill and it's a lot windier, of course, which makes some sense. Just want to give you a view of the landscape now. Here we're facing the south and southwestern aspect of Fort Hill. And out in the distance, you can see some rounded little peaks. Okay, there's one straight in front of us there. There's another one in front of us over there. And then a lot of valleys, somewhat flattened valleys. So we're on near the western border of the Appalachian foothills. So Fort Hill itself is about 1,300 feet in elevation. 1,290, I think, is the peak. Actually, near where we came up over this ridge is the peak. And so, and it's about 400 or so feet above the valley, above the gorge floor down there. Okay, so maybe even more in spots, 450 feet above the gorge floor. And so it's pretty rugged terrain. And but once you get on top of Fort Hill, it's interestingly very flat. So we're going to walk along the top of Fort Hill here for a while, in part because I know there are some vernal ponds up here on top of the hill that harbor a lot of amphibians that are breeding this time of year. So I'd like to see what we can see in that regard. And before I do that, though, I just want to say I did measure that chestnut oak over there. It was just shy of 4 feet in diameter. Okay, so that's a big chestnut oak. We've looked at a lot of those in this series, and they've often been much smaller trees than that. And so that's an impressive chestnut oak. And again, one of the highlights here, right next to the trail when you get near the top of Fort Hill. Okay, so now we're going to cross the top of the hill, look for amphibians, and then we'll drop down, eventually hit a few more highlights in the gorge itself here. Okay, catch you down the trail. Here's a stretch where it's very easy to delineate the wall, the earthen wall. This rise I'm about to walk up onto right here is the built wall. Again, with another giant chestnut oak on top of it. So these are really nice to see. I see a giant tulip tree over in the distance over there. This is just a tree lover's delight, by the way, which, it's no wonder I like to come here. So I'm walking along the top of the wall. You see how steep it is down below. And again, as I said earlier too, this was not thought to serve any actual fort function for warfare or something like that. This was thought to be probably ceremonial, where people would visit from far away in many cases, and use this as a ceremonial ground. There is some evidence from archaeological digs that there were permanent structures in here. There were some buildings and places where it appeared that people lived for a while and built things and made spears and arrows and things like that. So it was occupied at least part of the time. But a lot of these earthworks throughout Ohio, and again, Ohio is really well known for this, were ceremonial in nature. Some of the mounds that are all throughout Ohio were burial mounds. Some were just ceremonial mounds. But these really large structures like this really enclosed a really large, area. So this was very likely just a major ceremonial ground. But again, apparently that's still somewhat of a mystery. Why this was built and what it was used for. So, okay, so we're going to continue on and take a look out for some vernal ponds. I can hear in the distance, you probably can't hear this on camera just yet, but I can hear the call of a lot of male frogs who are trying to get busy. So we're going to try to approach that. I may not talk as much when we get close so that you can all hear that. So we're on our lookout for mating frogs. Just pausing to just show again the tremendous number of monstrous chestnut oaks around here. But I'm also into an area again where there's been a tremendous number of blowdowns. It's really impressive how many big trees have been blown down here recently, which you can see ahead of me and as I walk. But I do hear our frogs in the distance. So I'm going to keep this running as I approach them, and I may not talk as much or as loudly, because these things, when they get disturbed, hear loud noises, or get bothered, they'll stop calling, at least temporarily. And they will, till they calm down, and then they'll pick up again. But I'm going to assume that you're going to start to hear this on the camera very soon. And then we'll see what we can see in the actual pond. Okay, this would be what you call a vernal pond, which is a largely temporary pond that fills up in the spring, might persist into summer, and may dry up at parts in later summer, but get refilled again the next year. These are really important breeding sites for amphibians because there are no fish in these kinds of ponds. We're on the top of a mountain, for that matter, top of a hill at least. And so, it's a safe space for them to breed. There are other predators that can get them, the eggs or the tadpoles or the frogs, the adult frogs, but at least there's no fish, okay, that really will do a number on young frogs, tadpoles, and their eggs, if they can. So let's approach. Lots of birds, lots of woodpeckers around here. Now what we're hearing are probably a mixture of spring peepers and chorus frogs. Spring peepers tend to call at dusk. And we're here, it's in the middle of the day right now, but this is the peak of breeding season. So these would be males that are calling to attract females to mate with them. And then for those females to lay fertilized eggs, which they lay in the water. Wow, there's just a tremendous number of blowdowns here. Big trees too. Really large tip-up mounds. Okay, I'm gonna try to approach the pond here without scaring these things. So, let's see what I can do. It's to my right. If the frogs go quiet, we'll at least be able to see if there are eggs or tadpoles in the pond at this point. Okay, I'm going to turn right just past this log, I think. Okay, yeah, there's kind of a little trail that takes people over to the pond. These are, of course, very shallow ponds, probably no more than a foot deep at its deepest, with some wetland-associated vegetation, like sedges, certain grasses, and shrubs that can tolerate being wet for a good part of the growing season. Okay, most of them seem to be toward the other side from where I am. Okay, I can't get real close, but I'm certainly seeing masses of frog eggs in this water. When I get close, I'll show you that. There's some algae in here, of course. That's normal. And then the eggs, yeah, I see lots of egg masses out there. I'm not wearing footwear to go into this pond, but I'll try to reach my camera out to show you some of the egg masses that you can see. I don't know how much that showed you, but there's also little tadpoles everywhere. I'm going to try to get to a spot where I can get close. Of course, there also could be salamanders in there breeding right now as well. Salamander eggs. They tend to be a little earlier than most frogs. And, people had been posting in the last few weeks about spotted salamanders. One of our bigger, more dramatic salamanders. But this little you know, spot with this much water is all it takes to get new frogs to grow. Okay, there's a deeper spot ahead of us I'm going to try to get to, so. Okay, you're getting to see the naturalist do parkour right now. Okay. Okay, let's get up close to this spot. It's a little deeper. Yeah, they're concentrated on the other side of this area right here. The ponds are full of little tadpoles. Let me see what I can see. The frogs are often very difficult to see. They're very small, for one, these species. I'm afraid to walk across there with what I'm wearing. Wow, it's almost deafening. Well, they are all throughout this area. They're concentrated on the other side. I'll try to sneak my way over there. They're getting a little quieter with me talking, but I'll at least try to get close to see if there are lots of eggs. Again, these are all still trying to breed, right? So they haven't necessarily all laid their eggs yet. I did see eggs being laid in that other area. Let me try to get to the other side. I think I'll pause here and catch you on the other side. Okay, well, I made enough noise crawling over here that they all went quiet, just to prove what I said earlier. If you disturb them, they'll go quiet. But as I leave and leave them alone, they will pick back up here again shortly. So I guess I'll do that. I didn't see a great deal in the water yet. Some eggs, some tadpoles. But they're definitely going to be going at it here soon, and this area will be full of little baby frogs soon. Be pretty proud to be a frog born on top of Fort Hill. I think that'd be pretty cool. Okay, so I've reached the far northern point of the top of the Fort Trail across Fort Hill, and I'm about to descend to go back down the hill. All right, so I'm just going to show you the overlook, a bit of an overlook here at this kind of promontory. And then I'm going to catch you at the bottom of the hill and start to walk toward the gorge trail and see a few highlights down in that direction. And that'll be our walk for the day. So here's our view. Secluded a bit, but still nice. It's a beautiful spring day today to be in the woods. Especially near big trees. Like many of the sites I've been visiting lately in southern Ohio, this has structures that were built by the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, back in like the 1930s. And so this has a beautiful pavilion here at Fort Hill State Memorial, beautiful sandstone pavilion. Now this building has been re-roofed and re-pointed and so forth in recent years. I used to like this building because it had a roof that was just covered by lichens and moss and little plants. It was like a natural green roof had developed up there. But I see it's been re-roofed sometime in the last 10 years with looks like cedar shakes. Well, let's just take a quick peek. I think these kind of facilities you can rent. This one's beautiful. This has a sandstone of much lighter yellowish tan coloration than some of the other structures we've seen. And it's all cleaned up and taken care of. You can see you can accommodate a lot of people in this one. You can, have meetings and whatever, picnics, what have you, family reunions and what have you, these kind of structures. But beautiful, beautiful old buildings constructed largely by the CCC. Something you encounter along the Gorge Trail is this old log cabin. Now, this log cabin is not a CCC structure. This is built with Lincoln log construction, but this is much older. This cabin, I believe, goes back to the 1800s or perhaps, well, yeah, 1800s. And the legend has it that this cabin housed a freed slave at one point. Okay, so right now it's just it's crumbling somewhat, and it's just, there's nothing in it but a space that you basically walk right through. The trail takes you right through the cabin and off to the other direction. Okay, so it's quite old, still in pretty good shape. It could be repaired further, I believe, but there are parts here that are falling down. You can see the size of the timbers that were used here. These beams, these logs were pretty big, all hand hewn, probably pinned together largely without nails, other than the cedar shakes were nailed to the roof, I can see at one point. So, the log cabin on the Gorge Trail. Let's continue our journey toward some of the nicer parts of the gorge. Show you some of the rocks. There are a couple of natural arches here. They're small, they're not sort of what you might see in Kentucky, but they're still interesting. This site has apparently some of the highest concentration of natural arches or stone bridges in Ohio, small or not. So we'll see if we can get up close to one of those today. I'm not sure. I'm running a little bit long in this episode, so let's see what we can do. I'm out here on a little point overlooking this creek, and I'm realizing that I described some of the rock around here as sandstone, and actually what I meant was limestone. So I'm standing on a big block of limestone right here. All right, so that makes up the gorge here. And the gorge has been skirting along this stream with these jutting rocks and so forth. And so this is just a little spot where you can poke out for a second and take a look. And when I did that, I realized right across this creek from me, can't get very close to this, but it's one of the natural arches here, one of the natural stone bridges, right in the center of your view right there. And so it looks to me to be about 8 feet high. If you were to walk under it, 6 to 8 feet high. And the whole structure is maybe about 30 to 40 feet long or so. And so that's one of the kinds of things you can see here. Here we can get a close-up view of some of these big blocks of limestone down here along the stream. Now that I've corrected myself on both sides, the Gorge Trail sort of skirts above these things for a good part of its journey, and then you come downstream side below them. And this is a good spot for me to point out this other interesting plant I'd like to point out to you, unique, and that's this thing. See that vertical jump? This plant is called Canada Yew. It's an evergreen shrub. It's Taxus canadensis. And so this is a pretty rare plant. It occupies more northern habitats than where we are normally. But it can exist in places like Ohio in these cool gorges that stay kind of refrigerated, so that maintain a more northern climate where they normally grow. And you often find them in limestone gorges, lining the gorge walls, hanging off the cliffs like you can see here. And another spot you can find these, for example, is Clifton Gorge, which I visited in this series before. Okay, so that's Canada Yew, Taxus canadensis. Of course, there is a ornamental yew that people grow in their yards and along buildings as a hedge, but that's a relative of this, of course, but that's not the same species at all. This is a native, but a relatively rare plant for Ohio. It's a an indicator of a more northern kind of climate that's maintained in this gorge, by these gorge walls. There's just a nice view of the babbling brook, the babbling stream. And I'll point out a plant here that I've seen flourishing today in many places. That's this bright green plant, sort of lily-looking plant in front of us here. Okay, it can occur in large patches like you see here, or more isolated little colonies. And that's wild onion, also known as ramps. And that's an edible plant. When I get to a place, a private property, where I can harvest some of this stuff, I'll dig it up and I'll show you what you can do with ramps. There are entire festivals about ramps in Ohio because they're quite good when you saute them. Okay, so, and to use in, various dishes. So that's one of the kinds of plants that you can forage. And so we'll check that out. Oh, there's a great blue heron that's flying right up the stream there overhead, which reminds me I will soon do a visit to a heron rookery on this series, because they are starting to sit on their nests. In front of me here is a beautiful light pink lavender flower. This is called hepatica. This is the sharp-lobed species, and I've been seeing this all day. I said I wasn't gonna highlight too many wildflowers today, but I've been just seeing too many that we won't be seeing for that much longer. This is a very early spring flower, and it'll be gone, the flowers at least, in not too long from now. But these leaves persist basically all year. In fact, they'll persist through the winter of the next year. And so those will be there, but those flowers will be gone in not too long from now. So that's hepatica. I came to this little nook to talk about this plant. This plant is called walking fern, and this is common in limestone gorges, on limestone cliffs like this, in boulders and so forth. And this is called walking fern. It's a fern, okay, but it's called walking fern because it sort of has these long extensions of its fronds that will touch the ground elsewhere and put down roots. And they will then grow a new, vegetative plant at that point and continue the process. So over time, a walking fern could, say, get started here, cascade to here, start a new plant, which could cascade to here, and so forth, along the cliff face or down the cliff. So really interesting little plant, a fern called walking fern that you see on limestone cliffs. There's another plant here that's not flowering yet, but it's setting up to flower. It's called rock cress. This is another of our native early spring mustard plants. And you almost find rock cress always on rocks. I guess that's why it's named rock cress. You relatively rarely see it just on the ground proper. It's often on rocks where it can basically find a niche, find a home. Here's another one. Very waxy appearance. It'll shoot up a flowering stalk, set flower, set seed, and die back for the year. It's a perennial, however, so it will grow back the next year. And these can get to be about 2 or 3 feet tall, actually. So just a little bit about these rock face communities, which are really interesting. Here's a little plant I was worried that I almost missed, because most of these plants are done flowering. So this tiny, delicate plant here is called a snow trillium. Okay, so you can see it has 3 leaves, thus the word trillium, and a beautiful white flower, and it flowers very early in the spring. It is probably the earliest flower that we have, one of the earliest, if not so. Of course, it's called snow trillium because it comes out and when there can still be snow on the ground, or it will still snow occasionally, so these things often will find snow on them themselves. And so that's snow trillium. It's almost done. Most of the others I've seen around, like here's another one that's done flowering. They're kind of done for the year. And I've just seen some of its relatives. It's the larger trilliums that are more a show in April and into May, just starting to come out of the ground and start the process of flowering. So there was nothing really to show there yet. So it's still time for these little snow trillium to shine, because they're almost done. Okay. Here's a plant I'd like to highlight. This is a native orchid in Ohio. It's called putty root. Okay, this is the leaf. This is a fresh green leaf of putty root that it's put out relatively recently, and will be present for quite a while, and then it will go away, and you'll forget about the plant for a while. And then in the fall, it flowers in the fall and sets seed in the fall. So what we're seeing right here is the last year's flowering stalk and with seed capsules that was made in the fall and even into early winter. So this is a really odd plant in that it puts out its leaves in the spring, kind of goes away, and then flowers in the fall when you've forgotten about it. All right, so I'll try to capture some of these in the fall when they are flowering. But here is the remaining flowering stalk and seed capsules. Okay, putty root, a native orchid. I took a short turn off of the gorge trail onto what's called Canby's Mountain Lovers Trail, which takes you across the creek and onto the more southeastern side of the memorial into a much less used, less visited part of Fort Hill State Memorial. So I just kind of wanted to see, I've been on that trail before, but I couldn't remember how to get there. And it's a much less well-used trail, a little bit less well-marked, and it requires you to ford the stream right here, basically through the water and to hop across a few rocks to get to the other side. Okay, so I'm not equipped to do that today, and I've been out here a lot longer than I had planned, so I won't do that today. But just to basically conclude our visit to Fort Hill, I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was a long one, and so I probably hiked a total of about 6 miles today, focusing first on the Fort Trail to take you up on top of the Earthworks area proper, and then spent the last half of the day doing parts of the Gorge Trail. Okay, so if you get a chance, this is a great place to visit any time of the year. And if you come, tell them the Naturalist sent you. Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye.